Hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our continuous testing online meetup today. So let me reshare my slides. I hope you can all hear me correctly. Good, perfect. Then let's start. So first of all, I want to thank all our sponsors for organizing this amazing online meetup. So we have sponsored South Labs. I got to know them because they are very fantastic testing framework infrastructure to do cross-browser testing and stuff like that. I think now they have even more cool services. Please check out the website if you're interested. And another sponsor is Trendic. That's where I'm working at currently. So Trendic, if you know this amazing event every year, it's called Agile Testing Days. So every year it takes place in Potsdam, and there we have very cool speakers and a lot of workshops. So welcome to join the event if you have opportunity and time. Other than that, Trendic also provides consulting services and also trainings. So if you're interested in trainings about Agile testing, please visit our website. We have a lot of offers. And another sponsor is TUI. Yeah, thanks all for organizing this event. So if you're interested in the past event or if you missed out, please visit our website. They have all the content available. You can check it out there. So now we have our Daniel with us tonight, and he promised us that he will wake everyone up, because it's evening and some people just had dinner. So I'm really looking forward this topic, dogfooding AI generated end-to-end tests. So I will give the stage to Daniel. And yeah, another thing is everyone, if you have questions, please write it down or put in the chat. I think Daniel will have a break for everyone to ask questions. And also at the end of the presentation, you also have the chance to ask your questions. So if you have questions, note it down or post in the chat. Your question will be answered. Okay, then I will stop presenting and leave the stage to Daniel.
Yes, welcome everyone. Excited to be here. I'm going to start sharing as well, and there we go. Everyone can see my slides, right? Perfect.
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I can't see you guys, unfortunately, so you're gonna have to speak up if there's something wrong or not working. All right, so let's get started. Yeah, tonight I brought like kind of two topics really, but we're going to be talking about dogfooding AI generated end-to-end tests, and the subtitle, so the startup journey, is really where we're going to start. So we're going to talk a little bit, yeah, of course, an introduction of myself and the company I'm working for currently, Octomind. And then I will get started with the first part, which is really about, hey, how does a startup actually work? How did we choose the topic we're working on? And how do we or how do we approach the entire product work? Yeah? So the work that is really special in a startup, where you're starting out something new and you need to find out, hey, does this actually work? Is this something that people would like or that people want? And how do you approach this entire process, basically? And then the more technical part, the second part, will be about basically, hey, we are a testing company. How do we test ourselves? So how do we dog food our own tool? How do we make sure that we work correctly? And of course, this will include basically a small introduction to what we're trying to achieve as a startup and with our product, and then get down a little bit into our testing strategy and how we see that. And at the end, I have a little bit of an outlook into the AI part that we're using, and what we see as some challenges going forward, or some of the things that we're basically working on. Yeah, and that's the plan for today. So let's get started. My name is Daniel Draper, and I've basically always been the weird dev who's a little too much into testing, as some of my ex-colleagues would say. And I started out at a quite large company that was working on meeting software. So GoToMeeting. I don't think they're that known anymore. I think Zoom won that war, but that's where I basically started. And I did a little bit of mobile engineering and backend as well there. And then I've switched to a startup. Yeah, so starting in the startup world where I worked on autonomous driving. And there I really grew into kind of like the everything dev. So as it's common in startups, right? So you need to not just stay in your lane, you need to really look at a lot of things. So I worked on the backend, the web front end, including down to canvas GPU rendering, as well as the machine learning and the data engineering part. Yeah, and overall, it's already been a little bit of a while. Yeah, so not this 30-year-old resume, but at least 8+ years I've been working full time. And currently I'm the lead Octoneer at Octomind, and as you will see in the rest of the slides, we really love our theming. So our octopuses, you will see a few pictures of octopuses. Yeah, so we call ourselves the Octoneers for all the engineers here at Octomind. Yes, and Octomind. So Octomind is a startup that was founded last year in March of 2023. And on the left side, you see our two founders. So that's Daniel and Mark. And yeah, they really love that coffee place. And on the right, you see a picture, I think that's like peak startup, right? I don't think you could take a picture that's pretending to be more startup. So this was basically when we moved from our first very, very small, really literally in a garage office to a bigger office that we have now. Yeah, and now we're 9 full-time employees, 5 of which are software engineers, and we're have like 4 more joiners, so starting to grow as well. And thankfully, we have investment secured. So I think we can't disclose yet who our investor is, but we have something, and I think it's coming out next week or so. So thankfully, we have that completely secured and have money to really start working now. And the mission that Octomind started out with is basically we help you build better software. And that's, I think, something that really resonated with me. And that's also why I joined kind of as the first employee after the 2 founders, because I think you have the biggest leverage, right, in improving kind of the software side if you help basically developers, or if you help people build good software, right? And then that's how you get the biggest leverage. Yes, and I have one more slide about Octomind, I think. So this is all the nice people that I'm working with in the team. Super fun, and a lot of us work together in at least 1 company. Some of us work together in even 2 companies, so we all know each other for a long time, which is super fun then to work in a startup context. Yeah. And the previous startup, like I said, was working in autonomous driving and was quite big at the end. So that worked out, and hopefully we can beat them in size. All right. And why did Octomind actually choose the topic end-to-end testing, which is what we're focusing on, or what we're working on? So there's one big technological reason, I think, which is that large language models, so ChatGPT, right, came out or really started taking off, I guess, in the last 2-ish years. And we saw this as basically an enabling technology. This is something that wasn't there before. And this is something that can really enable completely new ways to approach problems. And that's something that we thought is, it's prime time kind of to found a startup. And we really wanted to also help devs build software correctly. And we wanted to enable devs to build software faster, or more software, or better software, basically all of those things. So we really will embrace this kind of, hey, let's get other people to build the greatest software ever, and we can be this nice enabler. And another thing is that, of course, the large language models are pretty known now. And at first, we had some ideas around, hey, how can we help devs? Maybe documentation. Yeah. So in all the companies I've worked at, documentation was always an issue, and it was never great, I'd say. But on the other side, we thought that this is a very obvious kind of application of the large language models. So we decided against it, and there were some other like go-to-market and business side reasons that we didn't go for it. But in the end, I think it's something that I even brought up way back when we started discussing, hey, what's an actual topic we could work on as a startup? And that's if I remember all the dailies that I've been part of as a software engineer, very often people say, hey, the feature is done, right? The feature is done. And then it comes up, well, okay, it's done, but I just need to fix the tests. And I think that's something we've all experienced, right? You're really excited and you're like, oh, the feature is done. And then you look at the tests and they're all broken and you need to fix them for a long time. And of course, there's test-driven development. And I do that sometimes, but we all know that it's not maybe 100% practical. So fixing the tests was kind of really a thing that we thought we could provide value in. And yeah, why end-to-end tests? Well, I think unit tests and integration tests are things that are much harder for an AI model to do. And on the other side, end-to-end test is really like the user sees it. Yeah. So on the end-to-end side, it's about, can the user understand your page? And if yes, then AI should be able to, right? So approaching it kind of from this, hey, is the AI able to, what is it actually able to do? And of course, it's only able to do what a human would also be able to do. Yes, and that's when we started out looking into end-to-end tests and basically working on this. And the first prototype we had, this is from March 2023. And don't ask me why I chose these fonts. I don't know, to be honest. These are definitely not how it looks anymore, but the vision stayed the same, which is, I think, quite cool. So we really want to be able to have a very quick setup, a very quick way into the tool. So we only need a URL, a publicly accessible URL of something that's hosted somewhere, that's deployed, right? And if we have that URL, we will start generating tests and finding test cases for you. And that's the vision we started with. And that's still what we try to aim for today, basically. Yes, and like I said, a little bit about the product side, or how we approach, finding the right things to work on. And as this is a continuous testing meetup, I thought it's quite fitting that the name of this kind of approach is continuous discovery, something coined by Teresa Torres, here you can see on the left. And really, it's also about continuously testing your product assumptions. And what that actually means, we will get into in a later slide, but basically it's about that you should decide what you build as a startup or as a company or as a really software engineering department before you build it. Because the worst thing as a startup you can do is invest into something that doesn't work, that no one wants to buy. Yeah, because in the end, it's the startup needs to make money at some point. So we need to find our product market fit. And the product market fit is all about, hey, is there actually someone that wants to buy what we are building? And this continuous discovery process is basically tries to enable everyone, tries to enable companies to find this out before you actually build it. And it does this by doing a few things. So I will talk about this kind of customer-centric part where you really embrace talking to customers all the time. So we have, I think at this point, 280 or something customer interviews that we've conducted, and we try to do at least one a week and sometimes a lot more. There's the product trio concept that I will explain, and then go into this assumption mapping and assumption testing part and opportunity solution trees. I will also say I'm not Teresa Torres, so I'm not going to be able to explain it just as well as her. This is basically just as a starter and as an interesting look into how this side of the startup, of the startup life, I want to say, kind of works. And if you want to learn more about it, you should check out Teresa Torres. I put the link at the bottom here. But let's talk about the product trio. So the idea here is that classically in like Scrum and Agile approaches, you have kind of a product owner, and the product owner gives you the direction that you're working in, I would say, is kind of how it works normally. And the product trio is trying to break this up a little bit. Yeah, so there's always multiple people that take these strategic decisions, and there's three, as the name says. And as you can see, it's three octopuses, and in this case, it's someone from engineering, someone from the design or UX side, and someone from the business or product management kind of side. And we sit together once a week at minimum, and we kind of decide, hey, what's the next problem space that we want to work on? And it's very important that this product trio doesn't take the decisions about what we are actually going to build, so the solution space. We're talking a lot about the problem space and understanding what does the customer actually want. And it's been super interesting for me as an engineer who's worked more in this classical approach of having a product owner, of actually being involved in these discussions. And it's it's something different, and it's super interesting, I would say, but also sometimes it's super difficult to make these decisions. And if you get a look kind of behind the curtain as someone from engineering or from the more technical side, you learn that it's actually super hard to make these decisions, and sometimes you understand better why they're made. Yes. And then, like I said, we try to be super customer focused, and a possible customer interview. I at least gave you a little insight how that looks. So you basically write down, hey, who is the person that you're interviewing? You write down a memorable quote, because it's very important that later on, when you talk again about this interview, you can actually remember how did it feel during the meeting, because often, it really depends on how something was said to get the real meaning behind it. So what is the actual problem the customer is having? Is he frustrated, or is he happy, or is he annoyed, basically? So these kind of things. And to have that later on, to be able to recall what was happening, you often put a quote. Yeah? So for something someone said in an interview was like, testing is costing my devs way too much time. And he was really intense about how he said it. So that's the quote that was memorable about this interview. So that's something we put down. And then you try to find insights, of course. So for example, this person wasn't sure how in our UX or in our UI he can actually get to his test case. Yeah. So how do I find it? And this is something you write down, because that's important information to be able to improve. And the biggest part actually is then finding out afterwards what are the opportunities that actually come out of this customer interview. And for example, one opportunity could be that this person wasn't actually only looking to, generate test cases from something that he knows he wants to test, but he really was looking, okay, what are the possible test cases that actually made sense for my site? So I want to have help in deciding what to test. So this is one opportunity that we extracted from customer interviews. And basically what you do with these opportunities, you put down the assumptions that you have about the opportunities. So you do this basically so that you can compare what is the next big thing we should work on? What is the opportunity that we want to solve to be able to improve our product, to reach our product market fit, to gain the customers we need? And there's this graph from the continuous discovery kind of book that we use. So on the x-axis you have, do we have strong evidence, or do we have no evidence that this assumption is true or false? So basically, do we have any data that backs it up, that people want to know what to test? And on the y-axis you have, how important is it that this assumption holds true, that it makes sense to invest in this opportunity. And I put some examples because this is very theoretical so far. So for example, one thing is the technical feasibility. Yeah? So if we're talking about, hey, can we propose test cases for you? What is very important, are we able to do that? Yeah. So is the AI able to do that? Can we build a tool around it that it actually works? And another assumption that you have basically is, okay, we want to achieve something if we implement this. So we want to achieve that users are actually more likely to use our tool and are more using our tool more overall. So this is a very important part, right? Because it doesn't make sense to focus on this opportunity if users are not actually looking for this or don't have this problem. And at the time when we did this assumption mapping, we didn't have that much evidence actually that this is true. And the top right quadrant then is the assumptions that you really should test, yeah, that you really should evaluate before you build something, because this is the leap of faith that you need to take for it to make sense to build something into this direction. And I also have to add that I don't think that Octomind is the absolute best at testing these assumptions. Yeah? So if someone is using this, I'm very happy to hear your approaches to assumption testing, but here are some of the things that we've done to test exactly this assumption. So we believe that users are more likely to create test cases if we do propose them, and we try to evaluate that basically before building something around that topic. And we did two things. The first thing we did is on the left. So we just asked on LinkedIn, yeah, and that's super nice because you can do it very quickly, right? You just post it and you get answers in the matter of hours or days. And that's really what you want to aim for, because you want to basically take out the risk of implementing something that no one needs or no one wants, or that's in the wrong direction, basically. And what we asked is, what's your preferred way of creating UI tests? And we gave kind of 4 answers, and then evaluated, okay, hey, how many people, clicked each one? And it turns out that people would like to prompt in natural language, at least from the group that we asked on LinkedIn. Now, obviously, this is biased, and this is not a scientific thing. So I don't think that we had enough answers to make this, a concrete decision driver. But the idea is that together with multiple of these tests, you will get an indication of is this assumption true or is it not true, and that helps you make the decision. Yeah, because this is not an exact science. In the end, you're just looking for a direction that you're taking next. Yeah, and you're of course still approaching it in an agile fashion. So you're building very small iterations and make it possible like this, that you're not building too much into the wrong direction. And another thing we did, you can see on the right, and this is, for at least for me as an engineer, it was like, oh, really? Should we do this? So it's kind of a fake door test. I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but it basically means you build something that's just a button, but there's nothing behind the button. And the suggest a prompt for me button at the bottom here with the little octopus AI icon was a fake door test. So we basically measured in our analytics, hey, how often did people press this? But in reality, there was no AI involved yet. It was just giving out kind of random prompts. Yeah, so we spent some time curating them, but in the end, there was no real functionality behind. So it was just measuring how many people click this. And I thought this is a little unethical, but on the other side, I do think as a startup, it's so important that you don't invest into the wrong thing, that I was fine with trying this. And we basically collected some information. Yeah, so we had a feature flagged and had a couple of people click the button or not click the button. And then we made a decision, and then we removed the fake door, of course, in the end, so that people are not upset if it's not giving you the results that you would want. Exactly. And then if you have your assumptions kind of tested and you evaluated, are users interested in the opportunity in this problem, or is this a real problem? Then you go back to the team as the product trio. So far, all of this is happening kind of in these product trio meetings and in continuous work that's asynchronous from that. And in the end, you end up going to the team and asking them, hey, this is the opportunity we want to work on. So I want Octomine to propose test cases for me, to tell me what to test. And you ask the team, hey, let's do a brainstorming and come up with some solutions. And that's kind of the last part of the continuous discovery process, is that you come up with opportunity solution trees. And this is really a way to structure your thoughts, I think, as Teresa says, so that you work on the smallest possible iteration that leads to improving the opportunity, or like making the problem that you're working on better a little bit for your customers. So this is an example. I don't think this is actually the real opportunity solution tree from us, but it kind of makes it easier. Yeah, so it's about, I want to have help in deciding what to test. And there's multiple different solutions you can come up. So for example, I want to pick test cases from a catalog. This is something we thought about, where maybe there's just a list, yeah, and you can say, okay, this test case makes sense for me, I use to select it. Or on the other side, that you would want AI to propose test cases for me. And then there's possible solution ideas to that as well. Yeah, so for example, describing an app, and then you get relevant test cases out of that. So AI kind of takes an input, or parsing Jira and docs, or just using division in the HTML. And in the end, we decided for one of the solutions and did an MVP there. And yeah, you will see some of that later. But that brings me actually to the takeaways of the first part. So I think as an engineer, it's super interesting to look into this, and I hope you think it's also somewhat interesting, at least, how a startup works. And yeah, I basically talked a little bit about how we do the product decisions as an early stage startup, and how Octomind came to be. And I talked about this customer focus, and that's something that I think that applies for everyone in software engineering. Also, if you're working in quality assurance or are doing the testing for a company, I think it's super important to always keep in mind, hey, what is it we're actually working on, and what does the customer actually need? What is the customer pain point we're solving? And that's something that as an engineer, you're often too far removed from the customer, I feel. And then you lose this kind of focus, and you lose this thinking about what does the customer actually need. And I think that's super important to build a good product. And we talked a little bit about continuously testing your assumptions and doing this kind of continuous product discovery. Yes. And I think that's the end of the first part of my talk. And before we get to the more technical one, is there any questions? You can just unmute yourself, but I can also check the chat if there's anything. Let's see.
Feel free to unmute yourself if you want to ask any questions. Otherwise, Daniel, I think go ahead with the second part.
Yeah, sure. Then we will continue with the second part. Yes. So in the second part,
Sorry, hold on. There is one question now.
Sure.
Okay, so the guy, Alex, is asking who the users are.
That's a good question. I mean, do you mean in the context of what are the users for us at Octomind, or in general, what are users for any kind of startup or for any kind of company?
Hi, if you can hear me, it's Alex.
Yes.
Hi. Yeah, just in the context you were using the word users earlier, really, when you were giving users a choice. Would they be testers or part of your client development team or something?
No, these are actual. So these are we are. Our tool is just a SaaS tool that has like a self-service kind of and self-sign-up thing. So these are real customers in some sense. Yeah, so they're not paying because we have a free tier basically, but we're evaluating with those users in the free tier a lot. What are they actually doing? What are they looking at? What are they clicking on? So that's the users for us.
Okay, thank you. So would they're going to be maybe a team developing an in-house app or piece of software?
Yes, exactly.
Great.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's an obvious question. I wanted to clear it up. Thank you.
No, that makes absolute sense. I didn't actually explain who the users are, so that's a great question. Thanks. All right, but then I would say we continue with the second part. There's no more questions. Okay. So yes, in the second part, we're going to talk about dog fooding, and I really try to make it a cute dog octopus, but I think dog octopuses are just a bit too creepy, even for Midjourney. So this is what I ended up with. And let's first do some definitions in this case. So dog fooding or eating your own dog food is a term that means that you are using your own application or your own program or your own, basically what you're working on. And you use it in the way that it's intended, so that you basically, do the same thing that a real customer or a real user would do with your app. And it's a term that was coined, I think, in the 80s or something by a manager at Microsoft, I believe. And he later, when he was asked, so where did you get this term from, or where does it come from? He said that it reminds him, or that he came up with it because of the Alpo beef flavored dinner dog commercials that I think from the 70s. And I did find one that I think we can quickly take a look at. So basically, he said he's very eager to tell you that his dog eats only output dog food, and that's kind of where the term comes from, that you need to eat your own dog food. So the dog, yeah, if you don't like your own dog food, who will, basically, is the idea.
Ready for dinner, are you? Oh, I love this dog. And I want him to have what I feel is best for him. Alpo beef-flavored dinner with lots of meat protein. You know, there's as much meat protein in a single serving of Alpo Dry as there is in 7 ounces of the finest sirloin. I think your dog will like it as much as this fella does. Alpo beef-flavored dinner. As much meat protein in a single serving as in a 7-ounce sirloin.
Yes, and that's it already. I think old commercials are always funny nowadays, at least to me. So I hope that gives you some idea of where he got the idea of this kind of dog fooding term. And I think it's used quite a lot now in the industry nowadays. Okay, so we're going to talk about a few things. But the first thing I have to do is give you a little bit of an introduction of what Octomind or the tool actually does, and how it works underneath, because otherwise I think it doesn't make sense to talk about our testing strategy, because it's very specific, right? Each testing strategy should be specific to the actual app you're developing, because again, you're trying to solve a problem for your customers, and this is somewhat different depending on where you're working, and your app also works very different depending on who you're serving, so your testing strategy has to change. But Octomind itself. So this is how our sign up page, or the first when you go to Octomind, how it looks, and it's still the same vision, like I said. So you only need a URL, and then you can sign up, and we will try to give you some meaningful AI generated test cases, basically depending on how your page actually looks. And we do this by using the information that's available. 3 things basically. So on the one side, on the top right, we basically use a screenshot, so a visual representation of your website or your web app. So we just start a browser, take a screenshot, and then we let the AI model infer something about this page from the screenshot. Another very important information, of course, is the actual DOM, so the HTML of the web app or the website. And as you might know, a lot of these large language models have very strict constraints about how much you can actually feed in to the model. And this is a problem because in HTML, as I can definitely tell you, there's so much noise and so much stuff that it, A, doesn't fit into the model, and B, it also very often actually confuses it. So if you just give it straight up the HTML, it's basically, it doesn't know what's going on. And I will go into a little more detail about that later, what that means on the AI side. And the third input that we take to come up with a test case is basically a prompt. So a description of a goal that the AI agent is trying to achieve. So this could be something like here, where it's checked that a user can sign up to the newsletter. So the goal is, hey, find the newsletter email entry field and enter something into the email entry field, and then assert that the sign up worked correctly in some form. And the AI agent then takes all of this information, goes to the website, and can do interactions on this website. So it can basically click on things, it can scroll, it can enter text on different elements. So basically all the things you need in a real UI or end-to-end test, right? And what it gives you in the end is an abstract representation of a user flow or a test case. And this is how this looks in our tool on the left. So again, we see the prompt from before, and we see what the AI actually produced out of the prompt. So it found an interaction, so it needs to enter some email into some text field. It needs to click the sign me up button, and it needs to assert that something is visible. In the last case, the assertion selector is obviously not very helpful for a human, but I can tell you it's basically the little snack bar that pops up that tells you, hey, you successfully signed up to the newsletter. And that's what the AI agent is asserting on. And then afterwards, we can generate code out of this abstract representation, and we made sure that in this part there is no AI involved, actually. Yeah, so this is a fully deterministic process, and this is, we think, the better choice, because AI is non-deterministic, of course, and would produce different code every time and could make mistakes, and you basically need to retry and make sure that it actually works. And if you've ever used Copilot or ChatGPT, we all know that it can hallucinate things. Yeah. And if it hallucinates, it's super hard to actually solve this. While on the left side, while the agent is actually interacting with the page, you can have immediate feedback to the agent. Hey, this works or this doesn't work. I can click on this or I can't click on this. And that's why we made sure to make this part basically without AI. And I think it's giving us some advantages. All right. Now we know a little bit how Octomind works, and that should be enough to at least talk about our testing strategy. So we have a little more deep dive into the AI part of Octomind later, but let's first talk about how does a testing company actually test itself. So the classical approach, of course, and I think no testing meetup presentation is complete without a slide about the testing pyramid, right? So the classical approach is the testing pyramid, where you kind of test from the bottom up. So you have 70% unit tests, or that cover 70% of the app, 20% is covered by integration tests, and 10% is only covered by end-to-end tests. And the reason for this is, of course, that it gets much more difficult and much more expensive the higher up you go in the testing pyramid to write these tests and to maintain them. And on the other side, it's also super slow to run those tests the higher you go in the testing pyramid. And these are basically the reasons why this has been the classical approach, I think. And I will present to you what we do now, and then in the end, kind of the testing strategy that we're choosing to follow. So as a startup, the level 1 kind of testing we started with is that, well, we had a production environment on the top right and super basic infrastructure. I mean, it's a startup, right? So we had one deployment, a Next.js deployment, and we had identity access management provider Propel off, and there was an environment from that. And basically we deployed that to the cloud as one kind of thing. And this was our production environment. And what we did have from kind of the very beginning, because it was very easy to set up and was super nice to work with, branch deployments. So every time you make a change in your application, we would deploy that change to an actually publicly accessible deployment. And then the production environment would run our own Octomind tests against the branch deployment. And that way we made sure that anything that before it goes to production, it actually works. And this was kind of level 1. I think it worked okay for the first, 1 to 2 months or something. But then at some point, well, something broke, which was basically the integration of multiple branches together. Yeah, so the team started growing. We were like 2 or 3 developers, and 2 people were developing on their branch, and there was no merge conflict. But in the end, it wasn't actually compatible, and the stuff wasn't working on production. So we broke something in production, and that's when you are like, okay, maybe our testing strategy is not good enough. And the second level we went to, that what is very common, right? You introduce an environment before production, and we all know the joke. Everyone has a testing environment, and some people have a separate production environment. Well, at that point, it made sense for us, so we had a separate production environment. After that stage, basically the pre-production environment, what we call staging, was testing our branch deployments, and production was testing our staging deployment. And this worked also quite well, I think, and we reduced the amount of regressions that we had with incompatibilities, and by having this extra kind of trigger before you move to production. However, unfortunately, still sometimes stuff broke, and we had things that made it to production that didn't actually work. So we decided, hey, we need to go even deeper. And as a testing company, you're of course in the unique situation. Every time you decide to test yourself more, you're also testing your app more. So it's actually really, really good as a testing company. And I understand that this is a unique situation. So I'm quite lucky to be in that situation. But we are basically able to design kind of our perfect testing flow. So how do you really want to test and approach testing because that's something that we want to transfer then to our customers in the end, right? Because if it works for a testing company, then hopefully it also works for everyone else. And this led us to the level 3 kind of approach, where now our branch deployments test itself. So that means that the branch deployment generates the code that is then run against the deployment where itself is deployed, which is a little bit of a mind blown moment, at least for me when we first did this, but it works quite well actually. And we ensure also by doing this that the code generation part, which is again just code writing code, that it works correctly with all the other moving parts that we have in our system. And we make sure that each branch deployment works as its own. We also make sure that staging works on its own. And what we added on top as well is that we added basically a scheduled end-to-end tests in production. And I think this is something that should be very familiar, right? So also when I worked in a bigger company, that's something you have. It's like the basic acceptance test that just ensures that in production something doesn't go down. And that's something that even we as a startup, so you have different infrastructure settings, maybe in your staging cloud project, in your production cloud project. And sometimes it happens that on production, someone, didn't flip a switch and then it works in staging, it doesn't work in production. So we decided, okay, we also need the kind of basic acceptance tests there. And I think this is what we're currently going with. And it's super nice, I would say, to work like this. And so far, I think we're quite happy with what we have. I mean, I think also as a testing company, you very quickly learn that bug-free is basically not possible. Not even for yourself, even as a testing company, right? But I think this approach is super solid, and we're very happy with it. And I have 2 more screenshots from basically all our end-to-end tests that we're running against our own application on our own branch deployment for each of our pull requests. That makes sure that everything works correctly. All the user flows are still working. And that leads me to kind of on the theoretical side. So I looked up, hey, what is this testing strategy that we're doing actually called, or is there some literature about it? And it's the testing hourglass kind of. And of course, as an end-to-end test company, you must have more end-to-end tests, right? I mean, that's what we're aiming for. But also, if I look back at what tests cause the most pain at some other companies, I really think that integration tests were the ones that were quite annoying to maintain very, very often. And if I could replace them with end-to-end tests, then I would always make that choice, I think. So for us, it works super well because we're dogfooding ourselves. And we still believe a lot in unit tests. Yeah? So especially for your refactoring safety, whenever you change an implementation detail or you change the output of one method, basically making sure that you didn't break anything in that method. And that's something that we do extensively. And like I said, integration tests are often a pain to set up and especially to maintain because there's so many moving parts, but it's not as actionable, I would say, as the unit tests. And on the other side, the end-to-end test is in the end really how your user uses your application. So that's what you need to ensure. And one more thing, of course, for testing strategy, and I think this is true for a lot of things, this is something that works for us. And we're in a unique position that we're a company trying to automate end-to-end tests for other companies. So it, of course, makes sense that we automate end-to-end tests for ourselves as well. But I do want to add that every application and every program is different, and you should really try to find a testing strategy that works for you. Yeah, so don't necessarily take my advice on this. This is just something that works for us, but I think it's quite nice that if you're able to think about, hey, how do I actually want to make sure that my application works? How do I want to ensure that that I have the confidence to release? How do I want to make sure on the other side that the developer gets the feedback as quickly as he really needs to be able to develop and to have that velocity? Yes, and I think that's it for the dogfooding part. But like I promised, I have a little bit more about the AI part of Octomile, because I know that people are always super interested in this, and I mean, this is also one of the reasons that we chose this topic, right? Because it's super interesting to work with these large language models, and they're quite impressive in a lot of cases. In some cases, they're really not that impressive. I can tell you, we've seen some cases where it's like, what are you doing, GPT? But overall, I think it's very fun to work with it. Okay. So for this last section, I have basically two things I want to talk about. So the one thing is proposing test cases. So that's basically from the first part of the presentation, the opportunity that we chose to work on. And we implemented a first MVP. So I will go into a little bit of detail about that. And then I will especially focus on the semantic website understanding, which is a huge problem for us and for the AI. And I want to explain at least what this problem is. And the other 2 points on the slide are basically things that we know are currently big problems, and that's something we will work on. So large context is just a never-ending thing. And I do note, of course, that there are models coming out all the time that have a very large context size. But the issue there is that they do not have the attention over the whole context size, actually. So they forget, basically, is what it means. So if you feed it in a very long string of characters or HTML, it will forget what happened at the beginning. And if you ask something that is basically needs this entire context, they are still not able to answer this very well. And the big thing, so the bolded letters here, fixing your tests, is where we believe that Octomind can really provide the value. And that's something we're continuously working on, basically. How can we make sure that your tests are only read if something is actually broken on your app? All right, let's talk about the semantic understanding a little bit. So I took a screenshot of one of the example websites we use. So I think this is a game that one of the other engineers played when he was like 12 or something. I'm not sure. But basically, this is the first screen you get when you go to this page. And there is what is quite interesting, and I think even as a human, a bit confusing. On the top right is the login part of this application, and in the middle is the sign up part. Yeah, so there's kind of two forms that are intertwined here, and even on first look, you're not sure where you would log in. Yeah, so I might even enter my username and password in the middle here if I'm trying to log in, because only if I know and I really look for the login button, I would be able to find out it's on the right side. And this is basically the huge problem for the AI as well, because what the AI gets from us is kind of a screenshot, but of course the AI doesn't have eyes, so it needs to mathematically understand what is happening on the screenshot, which depending on the colors or depending on the resolution, depending on many things, can be super hard to. And the second part is the DOM, so the HTML elements, and from the HTML elements and the screenshot, the AI basically needs to understand where does each element belong to. Yeah, so what is the login form and what is the sign up form? And we spend quite a lot of time optimizing this part, and we use a lot of different inputs to optimize how we group elements for the AI model. And I gave you an example of this on the next screen. Yes, so you can see that basically I try to put some boxes around things that could make sense to be grouped together. Yeah, so on the top right, of course, the login one, but obviously here the login button can also be grouped, and that would make sense. And this is super important for the AI agent to actually understand what do these elements actually mean. Yeah, so sure, there's a text field and it says something, but is it related to this other button? Or is it related to this other text? And similarly, in the middle, of course, you could make kind of a group out of just the HTML elements, or you could make a group that's a bit bigger and has more text because it still belongs together. And you could even argue that the green box there, so the largest one here in the middle, that all of these parts are related to each other and are one thing that the agent needs to understand. And this is something we spend a lot of time on, and we model it as a numerical optimization problem so that we can add many different terms to this for the agent so that it gets better over time, basically, and it's able to optimize its understanding of this website. Exactly, and then I promised you a sneak peek at our new feature. So proposing your tests, the first MVP version that was, I think, released a few days ago only, is that we now have a nice little octopus also in our app, where you can click on, so to get started here on the left, and what you will get out of it is drafts. Yeah, so test case drafts where the AI proposes a prompt for itself, basically. And in this case, it's something like, hey, test the recipe category selection, assert that you can select recipe category vegetarian, see that only vegetarian recipes are visible. That's the prompt for the third draft here, for example. And that's something the AI came up with after looking at the web page. So this is a test case that could make sense. And I can tell you, this is a recipe website. It definitely makes sense to test that you can select vegetarian recipes. So the AI came up with something meaningful. Exactly. And that brings me, I think, to the end. And there's a few takeaways. So just as a kind of summary, what we talked about, or what I talked about. So the first part is that, we talked about how did Octomind actually came to be, and how did we decide to work on end-to-end UI tests. We talked about the customer focus, this continuous discovery part, and continuously testing your assumptions. And then we talked a little bit about testing strategy at an AI testing company, something that's for me super fun to think about. How can you really make sure that your app actually works, and how can you be confident that you release, no matter how complex your application is. We talked about dogfooding there, and at the end, I went into some detail, at least for the AI part. And I hope you got a little bit of an overview of how we're trying to improve the end-to-end test realm, at Octomind, and how we basically believe that that's a good test setup could look like, but it's also specific to us. Yes, and that leads me to well, of course, a little bit of advertisement. So check us out. We're completely free to sign up with. You only need a URL of something publicly accessible under app.octomind.dev. And I think my marketing colleague would kill me if I didn't bring this up. We're launching on Product Hunt on Monday. If you have an account, and if you like, after trying us, if you like it, then we would be very happy if you check us out there and give us some reviews and some feedback. Basically, we're still at an early stage, so any feedback is good feedback. If you don't like it, if you don't think this will work, that's also something that's super important to us, because we're really still trying to find, hey, what is the product market fit? How can we achieve it? Yes, and this, I think, is the end of my presentation. I have 2 more slides, but just for people that care, I prompted all of the octopuses, and here's the corresponding prompts for that. Not sure if it's interesting to anyone. And now I would have time for questions.
Very nice. Thank you very much. We have one question from Rudolf. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So first, great tool. I like it. I tried it immediately. And the thing is, it created 7 test cases, and one of them is green. I have only executed them, but nevertheless, the traditional login. Why your tool created only 7 test cases? Is the beta version restricted to a given set of a given number of tests, or because I would expect that it creates around 100 or whatever?
Yeah, a very good question. So to be honest, this is something that we're still working on, this kind of thing. And we're really thinking about how does it make sense to get these test cases in a way that makes sense for you while you're developing your application. And I think what we're really thinking about is that we have a way to understand what you're working on currently and provide test cases for this. So kind of a way that you give us some input on what you're interested in. Because on the other side, so what we've realized, I don't know if you saw it, but we have link tests as an option during the sign up. And if you select link tests, you will get hundreds of tests. And what we've seen in our analytics is that people are really overwhelmed if you give them that many tests. And in the end, these are not the critical user flows. So we're trying to really go for this regression part, but very good question, and super interested in what you think, like what is the number that you're actually looking for? So that's something that we are really working on.
Okay, and I have a second question. So how about your tool? Do you think about a feature of creating test data? Yeah, no, I have a certain also. Yeah, so how about creating test data? So that means test data for my test case, that I always can start with fresh test data. Do you have something in place, or?
We don't have some, well, so kind of, I'm gonna say. What we have in place is that you can run prerequisite test cases. So basically you have a dependency. So you have a test case that needs to run first, where you do some create project or something, and then you have a test case that works in that project. And the most obvious example of that is a login. So you have a login test case, and afterwards you can do stuff, right? And this is kind of state that then that we can share. Unfortunately, we don't have a setup hook or something yet. This is also something that we're working with the users that use us actively. So we're trying to figure out what's the best way to do that. So we're thinking about maybe it's a hook, so something we call. So basically like an API call on your side, and then you can do some setup. Or we're thinking if there's a way to basically put custom code into the test before our test case runs. So there's also, no good answer, unfortunately, but something we definitely want to work on.
Okay, and now my last question, and then I'm done. Sorry. I read that you generate playwright test cases. Yeah. So can I then can I get the access to the code, or So how is this organized?
Yes, you can download the code. And you can just access it in the tool actually, and then you can get it and you can use it. So if you don't want to use Octomind anymore for some reason, then you can just copy paste the code. But it's not a two-way thing, right? So it's just basically in our tool you can get the code, but it's there.
To be honest, I didn't find this feature for download the playwright tests.
You didn't see it. I mean, that's good feedback. I think it's a bit hidden. Yes. That's quite possible.
Okay, maybe a good idea to tell us where we can find it. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Great questions, Rudolf. Thank you. Alex, feel free to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, hi. Just something that earlier on in your presentation, you mentioned when you showed the slide about self-testing per environment, which is obviously a big game changer. And you said you were happy with the output at a high level. What were your criteria for that happy state?
Do you mean what were my criteria for saying it's that we're happy with it, or for like coming up with that approach?
The former. So what gave you that confidence to let it do its thing?
Yeah. So that it really found issues for us. Yeah. So that's the main thing, right? You really want your tests to actually catch the things before they go into production or before you merge even. And for us, our end-to-end test, I think, saved our asses really a couple of times. Yeah. I mean, we're a startup, so saving our asses only affects a few users, but of course it's still, we want to make sure that our users don't have downtime or something. So it really helped us.
Thank you. I follow what you're saying some of the way. So what I was inferring from what you were saying was that you now don't feel the need to have visibility on its self-checking functionality. Did I infer that wrongly?
You mean by visibility that we don't look at the test results, basically, so that
yes, as humans, do you have oversight, or do you have confidence that do you feel oversight?
Well, that's a good thing. So I do have confidence if my tests are green that I'm pretty good to merge. Yeah. And if something is red, then we really have to look into it. Yeah. So unfortunately, our tool is not able to auto-fix all the things, basically. Yeah. So that's
Okay, thank you. That's really interesting. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. I also have a question. From what we saw, I think you're mostly testing the UI, let's say, the web part of your application. You're not really going into the actual output of your product, right? You're making sure that the sign up is working and the interaction with the buttons around it.
Mhm.
Are you doing any actual result testing? Because those large language models always give you, unless you, I don't know, fix the seed or something, right? You always get kind of a variance in output. And I don't know if is that something you're actually trying to do?
So not exactly on the AI part, I would say. I think this is a different kind of problem. We are testing results for all the deterministic parts, basically. So there we do that. So for the code, for example, we try to assert that this is the actual code. We expect in that it's we can't easily make it runnable, because basically we're in a browser context, and we're running in a browser context, and make executing Playwright in a browser context, that would be, I think, quite next level. But we're asserting stuff on the results there, and for the AI part, this is a super hard problem, I think. Yeah, we don't have a we don't have a good answer.
Yeah, this would be pretty interesting, but not yet.
Not yet.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else got any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself or write in the chat.
I'll come in with a quick one. It's me again. Hello. I'm just wondering, when you're talking about your product and you're at an exciting stage as a startup, obviously, when you talk about marketing that, will you be marketing to testers or non-testers? Because as a tester, I might be concerned that somebody without a background in testing could end up with less than meaningful tests, perhaps. That would be the worst case.
Yeah. Good question, and I completely agree that I think tests are super hard, and doing tests well is also super hard. Of course, we are hoping that our tool, and especially the code generation, can help you kind of like ease in some of these pains. So for example, one thing we realized is that a lot of our early stage startup customers were using Next.js. And Next.js is something that does parts of the rendering on the server, then sends it to the client, and then kind of renders there as well. This is called hydration, this process. And this was causing issues for a lot of our other early stage startups, because it was basically destroying their tests, because the bundle would load on the client, it would reset the state, and then the test wouldn't continue. And this is something we specifically worked into our test code. So hopefully there's these kind of things that we can introduce into our code, because we have it under control to make it easier. But about your question, who are we targeting? I think it's mostly on the more technical side, so dev and QA, because in the end, if a test breaks and you need to debug it, I mean, the issue might be in your application's code, right? So you always need this kind of technical understanding, I think. And what we're really trying to do is enable testers and QA to do more with less, right? To get more output of their work. That's, I think, what we're really hoping for. But we have some POs, for example, that created test cases for their apps, and it was basically they don't have any tests yet. Yeah, and then of course it's better if the PO at least creates something that gives you some confidence before releasing. And this is also something that I think we're working on. So the answer is really, we're not entirely sure. I would say more technical, really, but this also depends. Yeah, so if we get product market fit with POs testing apps for companies that don't have any tests, then maybe that's also something. But I feel like the bigger market is most likely on the technical side. So I hope that answers that question.
It does. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Great questions. Anyone else?
So maybe I can hijack the questions.
Sure.
First of all, thank you, Daniel, for the presentation. It was insightful. Regarding, I don't know, compliance per se, how your company is protecting the user data so the private information won't be extracted and the secrets won't be in the wrong hands?
So the one thing is, I don't know if this was completely clear, but we don't need access to your code, right? So our tool or the AI is only working on the publicly accessible HTML. So there's no real data problem, I would say, there. We do, of course, normally, I would say our intended workflow is that you use us on a testing environment. and hopefully also there's no critical data. But of course, there is some stuff that might be relevant, but we're not saving this anywhere. So the only thing we're doing is we're taking some screenshots during test execution, but they're thrown away after, I think, 2 weeks currently as a setting. So hopefully this is on this side, and then the only data we're really saving from the user is something like your test username and your test password, and that's encrypted in our database. So that's kind of the compliance answer I can give there. So we're not. I don't think we're too young as a startup to have certifications or something, but we're thinking about it for sure.
Okay, and maybe regarding debugging, because like I saw that you have ability to insert the code, you can do manual steps. So is there any ability to like debug what's the problem? If there's some text will fail, or just this self-healing stuff?
No, we are aware that the self-healing is basically not there yet. So we need ways to debug. So the one thing is, I don't know if you're familiar with Playwright. They have the trace viewer where you can see all the network calls and everything. So that's there. So that's helpful, and you can run the test locally. Yeah. So we have an npm package that you just execute with the test ID, and then it just runs it locally. So you can just see it there.
And the last question regarding the execution of the test is running on Chrome, or what browser you are using. You can change the browsers, or maybe OS.
Yeah, so currently it's running on Chrome. It's also running, so we are running behind a proxy. So theoretically we can change the location, but no one has asked us to do that yet. And we are planning on adding more browsers basically. I don't know if we're really going to do mobile devices necessarily, because that's probably quite far away for us. But the browsers thing is something that's on our roadmap. So no concrete dates, sorry. I'm too much of an engineer for that.
Still nice. Thank you very much.
Promises. No.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone. So last chance. Any more questions?
Yeah, I would like to ask more about some special case, let's say for some low test or extreme test, does it applies to this case? Can I use this tool to test some really high loading tests, let's say maybe thousands of or millions of users test case, something like this?
So I would say it's definitely not the focus of Octomind, but you could theoretically do this. So we just have an API where you can trigger test reports, which then run all the test cases that you've defined. And theoretically, you can trigger 1,000 of those in parallel. Yeah, please don't do this because we will probably go down. But in general, I think this is, so yeah, we're not focused on it, but it might be a feature eventually.
Yeah, because some testing engineer really struggling to create so much data manually, and it really a burden for them to handle this case.
Yeah, that's super interesting insight. That's something that we've heard a few times actually, but yeah, not that specific. So that's super interesting. Yeah. If you want, you can click the feedback button in our app, and then you can set up a meeting with my product person, and then you can have a customer interview if you're interested. And information like this is really what we're looking for, the insights.
Yeah, I would definitely go ahead. I will discuss that. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Great questions. Who am I handing over to? Shuki?
Yes. So I will give everyone a little bit outlook of our next meetup, so you know what you are looking for. So let me share my screen. Yeah. I hope everyone can see my screen now.
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. So I hope everyone's awake now. So our next meetup will take place in March 14th, and same time in the evening, 7 p.m. And in the next meetup, Gil will talk about AI exploratory testing with Postman I personally think it's very interesting because I normally heard the API testing with Postman automated test, but exploratory test with Postman is quite interesting. So anyone who's interested, welcome to join our meetup for the next month. So if you cannot wait so long to join this meetup, we have something even more interested just tomorrow. So we have a friend who's Rudolf. He's also in our meetup. So he's organizing another very great Testbuster night tomorrow. And there will be 3 talks awaiting. So feel free to join and have fun there. So
Daniel, the
thanks a
first one might
lot.
be interesting to you, yeah?
Sorry?
With testing LLM output was the first talk.
Yes.
That was
Yes.
just what I was asking Daniel. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thanks everyone for joining this session, and I hope to see you next meetup online in March. Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Daniel. Awesome talk.
Thank you, Daniel.